Hello and welcome to Introduction to Handwriting Analysis. This training video is your first step towards becoming a handwriting analyst. This video will guide you through the techniques and skills handwriting examiners use and show you some examples of how to implement them in real cases. Forensic examiners play a key role in the criminal justice system. Sometimes a handwritten note is collected as evidence at a crime scene. For example, a ransom note or a written threat. In these situations, investigators will call upon handwriting experts to analyze whether or not a handwriting sample collected from their suspect matches the handwriting found at a crime scene. These experts are called questioned document examiners, and they look for signs of alteration, forgery, and complete handwriting comparisons to determine or rule out authorship. The rationale behind this forensic technique is that each person has an individual way of writing, holding the pen and forming their letters, which was learned at school when they were first taught to write. These differences are ingrained and will occur automatically due to the many years of practice people have accumulated by the time they are adults. People find it difficult to deviate from their practice style of writing. Based on this idea, a trained examiner can spot these unique characteristics of a person's handwriting and determine if the same person wrote the two pieces of text. As a result, each person has two kinds of characteristics that can be observed in their writing. The first is style characteristics, which are those features in a person's writing that can be attributed to the style that they were taught when a teacher trained them to write in school. The second, and more interesting set of characteristics can be referred to as individual characteristics, which are those features of handwriting that are unique to the individual and distinguish their handwriting from anyone else's. A handwriting expert is trained to spot the differences between these two characteristics of handwriting. However, the most important part of handwriting analysis is determining whether or not the individual characteristics are the same. If these are the same, then the notes were likely written by the same person. Style characteristics, however, are easier to copy and may be shared by individuals. Here are two examples from real cases where handwriting analysis was a key part of the investigation and important evidence for prosecution. Here, in each case, you can see that the analyst isolated some parts of the writing that they determined exhibited clear individual characteristics, and based on that determination, made a decision about authorship. When trying to identify individual characteristics of the handwriting in a forensic examination, there are a number of features to consider. The first is letter form. How much do they curve their writing? Where do they put the curves and where don't they? How much do they slant their writing? Is it sloped? What is the relative size of their letters? For example, how big are their short letters compared with their big letters? Also, consider whether they use connecting lines between letters and how they do that. For example, do they link their writing? Do they always link all of the letters, or only sometimes? You can see in the examples given on the screen that the direction and degree of slanting can vary a lot and drastically change the appearance of the writing. This has a lot to do with how someone likes to hold their hand and pen in relation to the page. It is important to note that these features may vary for a person depending whether the particular letter is at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of a word. The next feature to focus on is line form. How smooth are their lines? How dark are the lines? These features can speak to the amount of pressure a person applies when writing and also indicate the speed at which the person was writing in that instance. The example on the screen shows how heavy, medium, and light pressure can change the appearance of writing. Finally, pay attention to the formatting of the individual's writing. How much space do they put between their letters, words, and lines? If the page has lines, where do they place the words on that line? Above the line or right on the line? Also, an analyst may examine how large the margins the writer uses at the side of the page are, and whether they leave a lot of empty space on the page or not much space at all. The example on the screen shows how a person's baseline, or how they position their words in relation to the lines on the page, can make writing look distinctive. The direction and consistency of the baseline is different in each of these samples. Now we will walk you through a series of practical examples. In this first example, see how the person writes the stems of their T's and D's with the same slant and separation from the previous letter. This would be an individual characteristic that could be used to determine if they had written another note. The second example shows how this person has a uniform way of writing the flourish at the bottom of their Y's. This would also be considered an individual characteristic that could be used when making a comparison. The third example shows a person who has a distinct way of writing their T's. They write these with a loop and a long cross, a unique combination or an individual characteristic that could be used to inform a match decision in a handwriting analysis. There are a number of situations where handwriting analysis may not be reliable. For example, it is accepted among experts that meaningful comparisons between uppercase and lowercase letters are not possible. In addition, drugs, fatigue, or various illnesses can change a person's handwriting. People may even write slightly differently in the evening compared with the morning depending on fatigue levels. Also, the quality of the exemplars or samples is a consideration, as this will determine the quality of the comparison that can be made. Thank you for your attention. We wish you well in your future study of handwriting analysis as a forensic technique.